We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Pflugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our ever-growing channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends. If you want to support this show with their donations, super chat, hit the $sign, make a comment. We'll get to your comment as soon as possible. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome into the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a PATC legend with your comments in the chat room and with your phone calls later in the show. We always do phone calls. PATC community demands to be heard. Welcome in, everybody. I appreciate you all coming in this Monday afternoon. We're getting ready. We are getting ready for the weekend already. Rivalry week. The biggest week in the regular season, the last week of the regular season. The drama is high. Who's going to qualify for the conference championship games? And by the way, is the future conference semifinals? Brian Murphy, WRAL, brought up one of the many reasons we've discussed about here in the couple years or a year and a half that we've had this YouTube channel. We've talked about conference semifinal weekends. These conferences are getting so big. There's lots of reasons that we're heading in possibly in the future with semifinal weekend. We'll talk about that. Jim Phillips. Jim Phillips, ACC Commissioner. We did an early peak episode on this morning. And this is one of our main topics of our live show today. Now, what is an early peak episode? We announced it on Saturday in our watch party. We did a live show Sunday. An early peak episode now. You can watch an early peak episode with an early peak membership. We're not taking away any content. We're still doing our live shows. We're still doing our watch parties. We're still doing our episodes. We did an episode this morning, episode 332, that Jamie Chadwell looks to be still the number one guy on the Mississippi State Bulldogs hot board list. We did an episode, but we also did an early peak episode for members. And we're going to be talking about all type of different things at the early peak episodes. It's, early peak episodes. We're giving even a little bit more extra content, giving you an early peek on what we're going to be talking about either later in the day or later in the week. But we're going to be talking about recruiting, things we don't talk about on our main shows. We're going to be talking about stadium renovations. We're going to be taking gossip, things that I cannot confirm and I would not put on a main show. But we're going to be talking about it at early peak episodes. We're also going to be dropping nuggets of information that we have. We're going to give you a little bit of a head start. So if you want to join membership early peak, we're just going to have one level membership, $5.99 a month. Hit the join button and get ready. Buckle up. We're going to be dropping those in from time to time. Early peak, it's going to have a little bit of a different vibe to it. We get right to it on what we're talking about at early peak. So give it a try. And later on, I know there's a way that other people can provide gift memberships in the chat. You've got to open up yourself to be able to receive a membership, a gift membership, because I know other people. I've already had one person say, I want to provide gift memberships in the chat. I don't really know how that works. Hopefully we can do that soon. Anyways, so that is a new thing we're doing. We're not taking anything away. We are just adding on to college football's peak around the corner. We've gotten a lot of good comments from the early peak episode this morning, and it's going to continue. It's going to continue. Now, so let's get to it. I want to thank everybody for coming on in. I appreciate it. And again, you know how it works. Super chats, the donations have kept the lights on here at this college football YouTube channel. If you put down a super chat, of course, we'll get to your comments right away. Then the memberships and then the non-membership. I'm going to get to your comments and when I can. And the phone calls is open up to everybody later in the show. I want to thank everybody for coming on in. Richard L., Randy Taylor, Cornelius Green, Ryan Brooks, Mr. Buckeye, Gerald Jones, Mr. Bruin, Pure Mutter, Jay Pure Mutter, Kenneth Evans is in the house. Washington Huskies are everywhere. Matt Neeson, Nicholas Boardman. A few schools, half your conference wants to leave for a bigger payday. Are you high? MBM, holy smokes. More realignment news. Again, as we explained in the early peak episode this morning, it is not what Jim Phillips is saying. It's what he's not saying in these interviews. Commissioners, traditionally, especially in an autonomy conference, commissioners of autonomy conferences do not speak in this manner. But I think he's leaving a lot of things out. And I think he's being truthful. I don't think he's pulling a George Kliakoff. I think he's pulling a Jim Phillips. I think he's actually being truthful to us. And he's being truthful to the schools in his conference, which is the most important thing. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it. Hold on, everybody. We're going to get to it. Richard L., I heard a cherry Coke. Yes, you did. Zero sugar cherry Coke. You're absolutely right. Jamie Thornton is in the house. Donnie McNeary, Cameron B., Mr. Jayhawk, Immaculate. Immaculate is in the house. Mr. Hawkeye, Scott Wilson, Expedition Greg. Thanks for all coming in. I appreciate it. J-Rod is in the house as well. We're going to get to it right away. We're going to talk about Jim Phillips first. Again, it's not what he said. It's what he leaves out. And he's been doing this the last 3 or 4 times he has spoken. He's leaving a whole... We're going to get to it in a second. Jim Phillips, we're going to talk about the FCS playoffs starting this Saturday. We got the seedings. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about conference semifinals. Brian Murphy brought it up. The possibility. One of the major reasons we may need to have these large conferences go to the conference semifinals. Having semifinals within the conference. But it's kind of difficult to do. We'll bring up a couple big hurdles. There are ways to do it. But it's not so easy. There's a lot of pros to doing it, though. We'll get to that in a second. Jamie Chadwell, we'll get to that as well. And, of course, these weekend games. So, let's get to the main story that we covered. We covered in our early peak episode. First of all, hold on, everybody. Hold on. Thank you so much, MBM, for your membership. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Again, just hit the join button if you want to be an early peak member of the College Football's Peek Around the Corner. You'll get the early peak episodes, membership. You can watch them. One dropped this morning, MBM. We're going to be going over it right now. Okay. Let's get to it. Charlotte Business Journal. Charlotte Business Journal. ACC ushers in a new era with strategic relocation and expansion. Now, we're not going to go through the whole article. There is a link in the description box. You can read the whole thing. There's a major change. This is from Laura Williams, Charlotte Business Journal. There's major change in college athletics these days. But the Atlantic Coast Conference relocation to Charlotte comes with 2 certainties. The ACC name will stick, and the Queen City is likely to host the men's basketball championship soon. The ACC officially moved its headquarters to Charlotte from Greensboro in late August. 2 days later, the conference expanded, adding San Francisco area schools, Stanford University, and the University of California, and SMU in Dallas. The ACC went on the offense to nab those schools left by the implosion of the Pac-12 and strengthen its numbers amid a shakeup in the Power 5 conferences, said Jim Phillips, ACC Commissioner. Despite the coast-to-coast membership, the conference will remain the ACC. Now, just again, a reminder, this article was published Friday evening. Today is Monday. A lot of people didn't see this article, okay? We're covering it on a live show, and we did it earlier in our early peak episode 1 this morning. We're not giving up the ACC name, said Phillips. We're not surrendering that beautiful brand and identity for 70 years because the league has expanded. So it don't matter. They're going out to California, Stanford, California, Berkeley, SMU, and Dallas, but they're not going to change that name. They're not going to change that brand. Okay? Phillips joined Janet LaBar, president and CEO of the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance, and Danny Morrison, executive director of the Charlotte Sports Foundation, and former NFL Carolina Panthers president, for a discussion celebrating the ACC's move to Charlotte. Taylor Tannenbaum, host and reporter of the ACC Network, moderated the discussion. The event was sponsored by Burr and Foreman and presented by the Charlotte Business Journal. On the move to Charlotte, Greensboro has been the home to the ACC since its founding in 1953. It's moving to Charlotte. It's moving to Charlotte when Phillips succeeded longtime ACC Commissioner John Swofford 2 years ago. His goal was to modernize the conference. The ACC considered 15 cities in its footprint. Charlotte offered an international airport, made even more important with the league's recent expansion. The ACC network and Fortune 500 companies with the promise of sponsorship. Now, finally, the last part of the article, and the important one that we're going to talk about. On what's next. College athletic conferences in a period of transition triggered by negotiations on TV rights. 8 of the Pac-12 members are leaving for the Big Ten or the Big 12. The SEC is gaining Texas and Oklahoma. ACC's gain of Stanford, Cal, SMU was a tactical move that strengthens the conference, Phillips says. It fortifies the fortress. Now, we've heard Jim Phillips use this phrase before. He did not just use it in this Charlotte article, this Charlotte conference, in the Charlotte Business Journal. It fortifies the fortress. He's used that before. If a couple want to go, they can go, and it won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast. That's not going to happen. I'm going to repeat. It fortifies the fortress. We've heard that before. The backfilling of getting Stanford, California, and SMU, that's a tactical move. You are proactive in the backfilling. So you don't go down below the 15 membership to possibly lose out on the ESPN media contract with ACC. It fortifies the fortress. But here is the PATC money shot of the article. If a couple want to go, they can go, and it won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast, the Pac-12. Now, let me just say something. And when Jim Phillips says, if a couple schools want to go, they can go. Jim Phillips isn't saying, if a couple schools want to go, we'll throw out the red carpet for them. We'll open the door. We'll make it easy. Now, he's not saying that. We're not PATC. We're not saying that Jim Phillips is saying that. If a couple schools want to go, they can go. He's not saying if they want to go ahead, go. However, it's not so much what he's saying. It's what he is not saying. in this interview, in this conference, in this event, in other interviews, Jim Phillips is not saying the following. If a couple schools want to go, it's going to be difficult. If a couple schools want to go, there's going to be court cases. Jim Phillips is not saying the grant of rights bounds the schools to the conference. Jim Phillips is not saying that it's a near impossibility for these schools to go. It's a long road if these schools want to go. Jim Phillips is not saying that we are united and nobody wants to go. Jim Phillips continues not to say any of those things. All the things that George Kliavkoff said in the Pac-12, all those things that you would expect a commissioner to try to win the day, to win the press conference, to win an interview, to say, look, there's nobody wants to leave. If a couple schools want to go, man, it's going to be difficult. We got the grant of rights. He's not. If a couple schools want to go, they signed the grant of rights. They signed the extended grant of rights. They signed the 2016 grant of rights that goes out to 2036. He's not saying any of those things. The commissioner's not saying any of those things. He's leaving it out. And this is not the first time. In the last 3 or 4 months, he's left all that out before. What he says here is it fortifies the fortress. If a couple want to go, they can go. And his emphasis is what Jim Phillips. Now I know a lot of people in the chat or people watching this I get it. You're saying, Greg, man, your cheese has slipped off your cracker. Well, my cheese slipped off my cracker years ago. So you're only telling the truth when you're thinking that or when you're saying that. But I'm telling you, Jim Phillips continues to emphasize. Now, give me a chance to explain something. Jim Phillips continues to emphasize. This is not the first time. This is like the 4th time in the last 4 months. Jim Phillips continues to emphasize that the conference is not going down if they lose some of their schools. That's what he's emphasizing. He's not emphasizing we're not going to lose a couple of our schools. It's going to be difficult for a couple schools to leave. They're tied by the grant of rights. They're tied by the ACC bylaws. They're tied down by the exit fee. Nobody wants to leave. It's difficult to leave. He's not saying any of that. He hasn't said that for a long time. It's basically, if a couple want to go, they can go, but it ain't going to take down the conference. That's what he's emphasizing here. We're not going down like the Pac-12 did. That's not going to happen. Do you know who Jim Phillips is? Do you know how he talks? Go watch some of his interviews. He's not... The most emotional part of this, it fortifies the fortress. If a couple want to go, they can go. It won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast. That's not going to happen. That is the position. It's almost like the ACC is in their fallback position already. The tactical move that strengthened the conference, Phillips says. Phillips is not saying, has he said it once? Has Phillips said one time that they expanded to California, Stanford, and SMU to create value to the conference? To enlarge the value of the conference? No, it's a fortress. He's building a fortress to protect the conference when they lose schools. Again, this just happened. Jim Phillips, November 17th. We put it out on an early peak video from members this morning. Got to talk about in the live show. It's not what he is saying, although that's pretty eye-opening how he's saying it. But it's not quite what he's saying that is the most important. It's what Jim Phillips is not saying. Now, all of that corresponds to what's been going on in the Holy Smokes Theater. The increased chatter, the first quarter of 2024 is what we're looking at. We even got a date range that seems to be really important to Clemson. January 20th to February 6th. We're keeping a close eye on that. SEC is becoming more aggressive. We know that Notre Dame just signed. We talked about SEC's aggressiveness. The chances are increasing that they could eat first and second and possibly third and fourth at the ACC table. We talked about that on November 6th. And then on November 18th, we find out that NBC and Notre Dame signed an NBC deal. So Jim Phillips, it's not what he's saying. It's what he is not saying. And he continues down the same line over and over again. Anyways, we needed to bring that up at here in our live show. I'm going to get to your comments in a second. I want to get through a few more items here real quick. FCS playoffs, I want to touch upon it. It starts this Saturday. San Diego State. They are the top dogs, champs. They earned the number one seed in the FCS playoffs. They're undefeated. It's a 2014 field. As you know, the top 8 seeds get a first round bye. The national seeds are Montana. The national top 8 seeds are Montana, South Dakota, Idaho, Albany, Montana State, Furman, and Villanova. And the one school that is missing out of that is North Dakota State. They had a down year. They did not win the championship last year. They took another step back this year. The Bison have lost 3 games. They're in the 2014 field, but they're not getting a first round bye. The first round games will be played this Saturday. Second round game will be played December 2nd. Quarterfinals December 8th and 9th. Semifinals December 15th and 16th. And the championship game will be played January 7th. So I just wanted to point that out to everybody. Here are the games. First round games. I'm just going to post it up on the screen. Not going to announce them all. Drake does play North Dakota State. Drake, the Harvard of Iowa, Harvard of the Midwest. I wonder what Immaculate thinks about that statement. Second round games, the winners play San Diego State. Duquesne, Youngstown State will play Villanova. On and on and on. I'm just going to put up on the screen. Those are the FCS playoffs. We go in a little bit more detail in our early peak episode early this morning for members of Peek Around the Corner, early peak membership. Okay, now let's get to a subject that I wasn't going to talk about. We've talked about it before. We haven't talked about it in a long time, and that is conference semifinals. Again, we've talked about it. When these conferences get bigger and bigger, and we don't think they have stopped growing yet. The Big Ten is up to 18 schools. The SEC is going to be at 16 schools next year. Big 12 is going to be at 16 schools. You see what's going on in the Big 12 right now. It's going to be tiebreakers deciding who's going to be that second team going to the Big 12 championship. As Brian Murphy of WRAL has correctly pointed out, Brian Murphy, this morning, these big conferences, 16 teams, 18 teams, are going to have to set up conference semifinals before the championship games or run the risk of 3 undefeated teams or convoluted tiebreakers among one-loss teams already here, making it to the end of the season. First of all, I agree with them. I don't think there's any doubt that sometime in the next decade that there's going to be 3. Now, it's going to be difficult in some of these conferences to have undefeated teams many of the years. And to have 3 undefeated teams, that's going to be quite a task. But it's probably going to happen somewhere. Right? It's probably going to happen somewhere. And when that happens, what are you going to do? How are you going to decide who your 2 top teams are to play in your conference championship game without divisions? There are many reasons why these big conferences would want to go to a conference semifinal weekend. And again, we have talked about this over and over again. This is one of the reasons that Brian Murphy brought up. One of the reasons. Another reason is, when you have a conference championship game, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, and the G5 conferences, you own that game, right? Now, suddenly, if you have semifinals, you own 3 of the games. All 3 of them. You could probably sell that for a whole lot of money. You're making more money as a conference. But again, it's how do you decide the conference champion when you're going to have all these teams who aren't going to be playing each other every single year tied at the top of the conference? We did not have that situation when we had divisions. There'd be a round robin in the division, right? And the champions of the 2 divisions would play each other in the conference championship game. Yes, once in a while we would have a 3-way tie, and it would have to go to a tiebreaker within a division. Didn't happen very often. But if you have 2 teams tied, you go to head-to-head, right? So, but this is different. This is a whole different kettle of fish. So why not do it then? Why not do it? Well, there's a couple big hurdles. One is the playoffs themselves are going to a 12-team playoff. They could be going to a 16-team playoff in 2026. We don't know that. It might, but it's going to 12. You're going to have to win 3 playoff games to win the national championship if you're not seeded in the top 4. These athletic directors, these commissioners, these coaches do not want to add more games than that. If you do, you're going to have to pay these student athletes even more than what you're going to be paying them a couple years down the road. Here's the thing. And these student athletes don't have representation. I think they will at some point. So how do you do a conference semifinal weekend without adding a game? In other words, when you're done with the conference championship game, that team has played 13 or less games. 13 games. Not 14, 13. Well, one of the things that we've talked about is having a 10th. We'll have the example of the Big 10. Instead of 9 conference games, you have 10 conference games. And that 10th game is the semifinal weekend, where you have the top 4 teams, 1 playing 4, 2 playing 3 for that weekend. And then you have 5 playing 6, 7 playing 8, 9 playing 10, 11 playing 12, down to 17 playing 18. The problem is with that scenario, if you're not going to have divisions, if you're not going to have pods, the problem with that is how before the season starts, you're going to need to know the home and away of the last 10th conference game for every team. Fan doesn't need to know who they're going to play in the last week, but they want to know if it's a home or away game. The football program wants to know, the athletic department wants to know that November 25th, or wherever you put it on the calendar, the third week in November, or the fourth week, or the second week, whatever, they want to know, is Purdue going to be home or away? Is Illinois going to be home and away? Is Rutgers going to be home and away? Is Michigan going to be home or away for that semifinal weekend? It's easier to schedule all this, to have a semifinal weekend within a conference where you have pods, where you have the pod winners. Pod A, Pod B, Pod C, Pod D. Pod A plays B, C plays D. You know that Pod A winner is going to be at home. You know all the Pod A schools are going to be at home. You know all the Pod C teams are going to be at home. You know all the Pod B teams are going to be away. All the Pod D teams are going to be away for that 10th conference game before the season starts. And then you rotate the home and away throughout the pods. But how do you do that if you don't have pods? I find it very difficult for them to be able to set up a schedule of a conference semifinal weekend without pods. And you can't have pods unless you have 20 teams. 18 teams for me doesn't work. I know it does for others, because if you throw a wild card team in there, again, you can't do the home and away schedule. And then you might say, well, don't do a home and away. Forget about it. The 10th conference game is you're not playing at either school's place. You're playing at a neutral site. Okay? Well, that might work for the semifinal teams. But you're looking at 13 playing 14, 11 play. Those teams, they go to a neutral site, no one's showing up. I don't know how you get to a conference semifinal weekend with all the logistics that need to happen before the season starts without having pods, small divisions. And the problem with small divisions is these athletic directors, these presidents of the SEC and the Big Ten, the ACC and the Big 12, they are determined that schools play each other as much as possible. They do not want to have a school play another school once every 3 or 4 years. Now the ACC didn't quite get there with their scheduling model, but the Big Ten did, and the Big 12 will, and the SEC will with their models. These athletic directors and presidents are determined that these schools play each other, everybody in the conference play each other as much as possible. They don't like pods. They don't like divisions. That alone, plus then the balance of competition, it's hard to balance out the competition when you go pods. But again, Brian Murphy's correct. Other people in the chat are correct. When you have these larger conferences, you're going to run into a whole lot of issues trying to figure out who should be in the conference championship game. You're going to get a lot of that. There's going to be a lot of drama. And it doesn't have to be 3 undefeated teams. It can be 3 teams with 1 loss, 3 teams with 2 losses. You can have 3 teams with 1 loss, none of them playing each other. So you have to go to a second, third, fourth tiebreaker. You never really had to do that with divisions. Sometimes you would have to go beyond the head-to-head tiebreaker, not very often. So I want to get your comments on that. And Jamie Chadwell. On November 13th, Mississippi State fired Zach Arnett, head coach. We did an episode on it, and we said right on that episode, the number one PATC candidate to become the new Mississippi State Bulldogs head coach is Jamie Chadwell. And today there's a couple reports a week later saying he is the number one candidate for Mississippi State. His family loves Lynchburg, Virginia. His family loves him being the new coach of Liberty Flames. Liberty's 11-0 in the Conference USA. They're going to be in the Conference USA Championship game against New Mexico State's Jerry Kill. Liberty could have a decent pathway to the college football playoffs, being the number one G5 conference champion ranked team in the years ahead. But I think it's Jamie Chadwell's opportunity, his pathway to get an SEC head coaching job. Does he want it? If he wants it, I think it's his. I think it's his. Coastal Carolina, Liberty. Look at the great job that he has done. Mississippi State, he's their number one target. We'll see what happens. Again, put down your comments and thoughts on that as well. Let's get to everything. Let's get to all your comments. We're going to open up the phone lines here in a little bit. Thanks again for all you joining. I appreciate it. Go Montana Grizzlies. Sankey already said the SEC won't expand just to expand. I bet they only take two schools, the offset, the OT, Oklahoma, Texas. That's Florida State and Clemson. That could be. Jared Jones doesn't like the fact that the Buckeyes will not play USC until year 3. The Buckeyes have the most traditional Big Ten schedule next year and the next year after that. But next year, basically, that's just a Big Ten schedule. I think they might play one. I don't know who they play. But it's the most traditional schedule of all 18 schools. Moen says they can have Florida State and Clemson. Just let the Big Ten have UNC and UVA. Justin Lucas says Jim Phillips and his team are determined to make sure the ACC does not completely blow up like the Pac-12. Bet it is something he works on every day. Again, Jim Phillips is doing something different that George Kliavkoff did not do. Jim Phillips, he doesn't want to say something that is patently false. He does not want to lose the credibility of the schools within his conference. This is my main takeaway on how he's discussing this. Again, we'll go back to the Charlotte Business Journal. It fortifies the fortress. If a couple want to go, they can go, and it won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast. That's not going to happen. Not only is he emphasizing the protection of the conference, the survival of the conference, unlike the Pac-12, I think he's also protecting his own credibility. There's been a lot of communications, ladies and gentlemen. He knows there's been a lot of communication, indirect communication. Clemson and Florida State, they've had indirect communication with the Big Ten and the SEC. Jim Phillips knows this. It's why he was so active in getting California, Stanford, and SMU. He doesn't want to go out and say, we talked about Jim Phillips, what he's not saying is more important than what he is saying. And I think the motive for Jim Phillips not going out there and saying, well, no school is going to leave. It's a long road for them to leave. The gore ties him down. He does not want to. He wants to keep his credibility. He does not want to say stuff like what George Kliavkoff said when he said UCLA would make more money. Actually, they would make more money if they stayed in the Pac-12 and not go to the Big Ten because of travel costs. George Kliavkoff put his foot in his mouth multiple times. Jim Phillips is not doing that. He's talking about fortifying the conference. If a couple schools want to go, they can go. He doesn't want to go down the road of there's no way that no school can leave us because there is doubt that they can keep everybody on board. Because he knows how active Florida State and Clemson in particular are in trying to get out. He knows this. He doesn't want to say something that he has to take back. He does not want to have to go to a Boston College, to a Wake Forest, to a Syracuse, to a Georgia Tech, to a Louisville, to a Pittsburgh. He doesn't want to have to go back to them and say, oh man, I never thought that they would actually do it, Clemson and Florida State. So he's speaking in the language that he does not lose the credibility of all the other schools, and he wants to have the credibility to get them to survive, to fortify the fortress. I think that's the motivation for the language that he is using. Again, let me know how wrong I got it in the chat room. Raider Vision. Greg, is it true that Minnesota-Wisconsin is the longest running game in the NCAA? Thank you, Raider Vision. Texas Tech Red Raider. I don't know. Are they the longest running? They've played each other the most times in Autonomy 4. Used to be Power 5 team schools. Are they the longest running? They possibly could be as well. But they played each other more than any other two schools in the Power 5, which is now the Autonomy 4. All I can say is that is a border war. That game is everything, especially for Minnesota, because, Wisconsin, for the last 30 years, they've been contending. They've been winning the Big Ten West. They've gone to the Big Ten championship game. They whooped Nebraska. They've done things. Minnesota's only really relevant year that really contended for anything was 2019 when they went 11-2. They won a January 1 bowl against Auburn. But, and then we've been getting whooped by Wisconsin for a long time, except for the last 2 years. 3 out of the last 5, 2 out of the last 2. The Minnesota has won the Axe. So now Wisconsin is incredibly upset because they haven't had the Axe in 2 years. They expect to win the Axe Saturday. It's been going on for 130 some years. We can't stand each other. That's why I call the Badgers in the chat the evil Badgers. And I got a couple really good friends, Badger fans, that come in the chat all the time, and I call them the evil Badgers. Yeah, it's a gruesome. Can't stand each other. Cannot stand each other. Bobby Bell, former golfer, absolutely. Kaizu, Greg, if these conferences go to 20 teams, is there a possibility they drop the conference title game to go to? No, I don't believe there's any chance that they drop a conference championship game. First of all, that's a lot of money for the conferences. G5 definitely not giving them. Plus, you got to know who the conference champion is. Remember the college football playoffs, the top 6, the top 5, it looks like, top 5 ranked conference champions are going to get an automatic berth to the playoffs. The top 4 of the conference champions going to get a first round bye. So your conference champion is tied in to the college football playoffs. If you're going to decide who the conference champion is, the champion in your conference without a conference championship game, that means you're going to be using tiebreakers potentially to decide who your champion is. That's not going to fly. No, I absolutely do not believe the conference title game is going to get eliminated. What's going to get eliminated for this to work eventually, if you're going to do semifinal weekend, is you're going to be eliminating a conference game, or you're going to be eliminating a non-conference game, or having one of your conference games be the semifinal weekend, or add a conference game, have that be a semifinal weekend, and drop a non-conference game out. So I think your conference championship game is your 13th game for the two schools that are in it. And then for your conference semifinal weekend, it's everybody's 12th game on their schedule. All the schools in the conference. I think that's, and again, I just went through it. It's so much easier to schedule if you have pods, 4 pods of 4 teams or 4 pods of 5 teams. So you can figure out that home and away schedule, and you can rotate who has home field. The games at those semifinal games, semifinal weekend, you know where the game's being played before the season starts. If you are the Mississippi State Bulldogs and SEC is going to have a semifinal weekend because they've got 16 teams or they got 20 teams and they're even pods, and you're Mississippi State and you're in Pod A, beginning of the season, and Pod A is home, those teams have home game on the semifinal weekend, then if you're Mississippi State, you know if you finish 5 out of 5 in your pod, in your division, you're going to be at home playing another 5th place team in one of the other 3 pods. If you're the 4th place team, you're going to know that you're going to be playing one of the other 4th place teams in the other 3 pods. If you're the 3rd place team, you're going to be playing one of the 3rd place teams in the other pods. If you won your pod, you know you're at home this year. And next year, you know you're going to be on the road as they rotate that around those 4 pods. I'm not saying that's the only way you can do it. I'm just saying that's the easiest, most clean way of scheduling this. But again, if you're the Big Ten, if you're at 18 schools, can't really do it. You got to be at 16 or 20. Again, my opinion. My opinion only. But we've been talking about this for a couple years. Jerry Jones, yes, I can't wait. Biggest regular season game of my 45 years of life. Michigan, Ohio State. Wow. The drama, Ann Arbor, the game, J.J. McCarthy versus Kyle McCord. Advantage Michigan, but J.J. McCarthy's been he's been slipping a little bit. He's been slipping. Henderson's getting it going for the Buckeyes. Of course, Blake Corum, he's always ready to play. Donovan Edwards and Roman Wilson. I think he's gonna be back for the game Saturday. The wide receiver for Michigan. Most productive wide receiver they've got. Lovelace tight end. I don't know, man. I don't know who to go with. I'm afraid to say anything. I'm afraid to pick anybody. I don't want the Michigan fan base is already upset with me because I've been covering the Michigan story accurately, but they've been disgusted with me. The Buckeye fans, if I pick the Buckeyes, they're going to be very upset because Greg the Cooler, I iced Ohio State in the playoff game last year. So I'm afraid to say anything. Will Michigan and Ohio State hit 20 million viewers? I'm going to say they're going to come up short. Don't think it'll be 20 million, but there's going to be a lot. There is going to be a lot. Expedition Greg, Ohio State is peaking at the right time. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Again, we're going to get to your phone calls here in a moment. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Make sure you get notified the next time we come up live on a live show or with our episode or with our early peak episode. Again, our early peak episode, we've just started it. We dropped our first one today. Membership, $5.99 a month. We're dropping college football's early peak. Membership only. We're adding even more content to this channel. Early peak episodes are things we're going to be talking about that we don't cover as much on our live shows and our episodes. Things like stadium renovations, recruiting is going to be a big one. And at times we're going to drop a little bit of information. You're going to get the early peak before we do a live version of it. That's what we did today. Early peak. Episode 1, we talked about Jim Phillips, November 17th, just a couple of days ago. You know what he said. You know what he said. It fortifies the fortress. If a couple want to go, they can go, and it won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast. That's not going to happen. We covered that in an early peak episode this morning. So if you want to join membership, early peak membership, hit the join button, and you're going to be seeing those episodes drop a few times a week. Buckle up, brace for impact. Now let's get to your phone calls. Again, please smash the like button if you like our content. If you don't like our content, hit the thumbs down button and let me know in the comments section how we can improve the experience for you, how we can improve the content for you. Okay, let's get to your phone calls as quick as possible. Let's get those lines open. We've covered a lot. We have covered a lot here. November 20th. Let's see here. The phone lines is now open. 763-260-1333. 763-260-1333. Michigan, Ohio State, Washington State. A lot of big games going on. Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl. Wow. Holy smokes. A lot of big games. Let me just check. Let me just check. I've got a couple things dropping in. Okay.
Call from
Immaculate.
Immaculate is on the line. Mr. Hot Guy, he's getting ready for that Friday game. Nebraska, Iowa. I saw that the line, they've got the Cornhuskers favored by 1.5. And I think I know the reasons why, Immaculate. Because Iowa, they're in the championship game. This game is way more important for Nebraska. If they can win this game, they can break that deathly recruiting cycle, finally getting into a bowl game after 7 years. Do you agree that's why the line is Nebraska favored by 1.5, and they're also at home?
Yeah, and, they won it last year. I don't have any problem with them being favored in this. They certainly have more at play in this, so you would think it would be a lot easier to get your players up for it. But if I'm an Iowa coach and I'm looking at all the players that I'm going to have for next year, I'm looking at them and saying, Nebraska has 5 wins right now. If we let them get this win, that guarantees them a bowl spot. And while most people think of the bowl as a big deal, it's not. It's the extra practices that you get to go along with that bowl game is what the coaches really care about. Because that's when you start to you play with your players, you practice with your players that you're going to have for the next year. And they need to make sure that Rule does not get those practices for next year, because this is his thing. He has kind of a rough first year when he's rebuilding, and then his second and third years he just turns it on. So from an Iowa perspective, I'm saying do not let them win. Do not let them get that for sure bowl game. They might still get one at 5-7, but you might also cost them it. Probably not, because Nebraska travels like crazy. So if there's any room for a 5-7, they probably get in. That being said, do not let Rule have those bowl game practices for next year. So I hope Iowa goes into this to win this.
Yeah. I would also add that it's important. It's really important for Nebraska because, it's just a bowl game, 6-6. If they win the game at 6-6, they go to Detroit or whatever. But it's really going to help them stop the negative recruiting. It is so easy for other schools now to say, hey, they go into a home of a student athlete, the guy who Nebraska's targeting, and they say, Nebraska hasn't even been to a bowl game in 6-7 years. That's the cycle that Nebraska has to stop. They have to say, hey, we made it to a bowl. We're back up. We're back and running. That's why I think this game is so important for Matt Rule. And I don't know about all these little bit of, a lot of people are talking, Texas A&M Aggie fans are talking Matt Rule as a possibility for the head coach. I find that,
I wouldn't say that'd be a bad choice. I mean, look what he did at Baylor.
Yeah.
I mean, he knows Texas. But if I was him, though, I know these days loyalty means very little. But starting a project like that and getting your mind around doing a project like that, for him to go to Texas A&M now would basically be for him to be saying, yeah, I don't think I was going to be successful doing that once I've seen it for a year.
Yeah.
But if you think that you do, then you stick with that, and then maybe in 2 or 3 years, once you've rebuilt them and you show yourself, then you go back out onto the market. That's what I would think, because you're just getting started on this right now. Texas A&M's a great job, but if he rebuilds Nebraska in 2 or 3 years, and if this isn't his final choice, he's going to have any option he wants, any.
Yeah.
And so I think he should pass. Well, does that mean he will? I don't know. But can't say I would mind. I'm more worried about him at Nebraska than I am at Tickle at Wisconsin.
Yeah. By the way, Tough Tony in the chat room reminded me, I read this on Brett McMurphy's Action Network. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Brett McMurphy's, I'm projecting Minnesota will be the only 5-7 team needed, but if more were needed, those bids would go to these teams in an order if they finish 5-7. Minnesota, number 1, Wake Forest 2, Rice 3, Mississippi State 4, UCF 5, South Carolina 6, because Minnesota has the best APR, academic ratings of the players involved in the program. So it sounds like the Gophers, if they lose the Axe, they can come through the back door and get into a bowl game. Anyways,
I noticed it doesn't have Nebraska in that lineup. So
no, it doesn't. Nebraska does not. Nope.
That might be it.
Nebraska's going to have to beat you. Going to have to beat Iowa.
I was going to say, yeah, because Nebraska might be ahead of you in that lineup just in terms of how their fan base travels to bowl games.
Yeah.
But got a couple things to talk to you about today, though, Greg.
Yes.
I could go into the conference playoff stuff, but that would likely be going 0 to 100 in 2.2 seconds. So maybe I should start with the ACC first.
Yeah.
People are starting to see it now, and it's become clear. And it's kind of reminding me of a time back before the Pac had its thing happen. And, a few people were talking like, oh, it's happening for sure. And everyone's like, you're crazy. We're kind of at that point now with some rumblings where people who were once on the you're crazy boat are sitting there going, well, it won't be that many. Or, oh, we have 18, so we'll keep our 15. And it's like, okay, those are the first steps, those backpedaling steps. People can think what they want in terms of, if they have 15, if they're free and clear. I tend to think there's more to it than that, and that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. But like you're saying, Jim Phillips knows something's coming, and it's his job to make people who are still going to be there, who are still donors and supporters and backers of all these schools, to still continue to do all of that.
Yeah,
and that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he's doing his job. I mean, it's not an easy job right now to be looking this, square in the face and maintain your sanity while you're doing so.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we saw Notre Dame getting out of the way, saying, nope, we're not going to make this easy for you. You guys are going to have to go do this. And so I personally think sooner rather than later we're going to hear from Florida State and Clemson, because if people were shocked by Colorado, all the whispers coming out of there, well, what is Florida State and Clemson compared to that?
and you know what? People, not the PATC community, but there was a lot of people shocked by that Colorado.
Heck yeah, they were.
Huh?
Heck yeah, they were. But Florida State and Clemson is more like a USC and UCLA or a Texas and Oklahoma. Like, it's way bigger than Colorado.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're losing those two, those are your only two that you could even rely upon to get you a 3 million rating out of the ACC. I mean, it's that bad.
Yeah.
Like, if you lose them, you've got no numbers to maintain that contract. Like, for people to think that ESPN's going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll go ahead and continue to pay these ballooning payments, because that's what's going on with the ACC. It's heavily back paid. So every year now going forward, these payments are going to be rising higher, and they're already, a good amount above where the Big 12 is. But if you look at the ratings, they're not. And just the threat of losing Florida State and Clemson alone, there's just no way that 40 plus, going up to 45, 50 million payment is going to be achievable. There's numbers that they have to pay, but a lot of it's based upon the ratings you get. And when those ratings nosedive, you're not going to get as much as you think you're getting. Like, that's just part of the contract.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even include when ESPN comes to you and says, we have to renegotiate this. When we signed this and we did the whole 15-team clause, we had no idea this was going to happen. I mean, we thought, maybe it's set up so, like, if a school leaves and you replace that with one other one, okay, that's fine. But when you talk about the entire top third of your conference leaving at the same time, maybe, I don't care who you replace them with. I mean, if it's Stanford, California, SMU, Tulane, Rice, USF, as some people have posited, that does not replace the loss of Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, Virginia, Virginia Tech, North Carolina State. And then that doesn't even include, once that becomes obvious and the loss of value you have there, if you're Louisville and you're sitting there, so you're looking at that going, that's going to be a terrible contract and payout. We're looking over at the Big 12. That might actually be better. And if that's the case, Pitt people like to say no right now. But when they're smart enough there to look at numbers and realize, okay, well, maybe. So it's a tough situation, man. And I don't know how it comes to be, but I think Notre Dame leaving basically ensures that this has to be a big move. It can't be a small move.
We do have breaking news.
Of course. People said I had to call so they could get breaking news. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll call it first.
Okay. Breaking news. I apologize to Immaculate once again. as the chat room knows, Immaculate is the trigger. He is the trigger for breaking news in the live show at Peek Around the Corner. Neil Horowitz, big news. Greenfly, a massive partnership with the Big Ten. Includes access to video highlights, Big Ten Network clips for student athletes, a conference-wide deal with student athletes from all schools able to access content. We're going to get into the specifics in a second. There's one paragraph that I want to show you all. Again, this is breaking news, just happened. Should be especially valuable for conference championship events for student athletes that end up competing in the pros or Olympics and to get to say on Greenfly to get that content. We go into the press release again. Now I lost that. Why did I lose that? Okay. You can go in. I want to get to this paragraph right here. I'm highlighting it up on your screen. Let me pop this up a little bit. There we go. A Big Ten student athletes across many sports will have access to Greenfly's cutting-edge content tools, allowing them to create, receive, and share compelling photos and videos with fans on social media. The technology is currently being used by leagues, teams, and federations around the world, including Major League Baseball, PGA Tour, NHL, and the NBA. The partnership with the Big Ten Conference marks Greenfly's first broad collaboration in college athletics. There also one other, this talks about the NIL thing in this. A groundbreaking partnership, a leading platform for short-form content capture for thousands of Big Ten student athletes. It talks about NIL here. Let me... This will be able to support student athletes as they build their online presence and connect with fans, brands, and alumni around the world. Broadcast content for the Big Ten Network and other conference partners will make it easier for student athletes. As content licensing agent for the Big Ten Conference and the Big Ten Network, will introduce an NIL footage licensing program. This is Veritone. As the content licensing agent for the Big Ten Conference and the Big Ten Network, Veritone will introduce an NIL footage licensing program to power the partnership, which enables student athletes to use Big Ten footage on their social media platforms to help build their personal brands. The program will also provide a pathway for student athletes and their NIL partners to license Big Ten footage through Veritone for use in commercial endeavors. So, again, this is breaking news. I don't really have all this calibrated, what it means. But again, giving more tools to the student athletes to build their brand, to build their NIL value, to be able to take Big Ten footage and use it across their platforms and all that stuff. So more, these conferences, Immaculate, are getting bigger, more powerful. Student athletes are going to get more and more partnership in with their conference that they play for.
Certainly kind of seems to be going along the lines of what Moen has suggested in terms of these conferences seem to be doing things with the students that are part of them directly.
Yeah.
And this looks to be something that's made available direct to students from the conference and not necessarily from the conference to the schools to determine on their own if you want to have this. Like usually in the past, the schools would make these kind of agreements on their own, I think, and then make it available to their students. But this is suggesting a new kind of relationship between the conference and the student athletes themselves. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, yep. And we've been ever since episode 1, we've been saying that these conferences are going to get more and more powerful. They're going to be conference and schools. They're going to increase the compensation of the student athletes through a couple different means. One of them being NIL, but the conferences are going to be becoming more and more important to the student athletes. More powerful.
This is a good little that most people probably wouldn't see. I wouldn't have seen that, so
no.
Good find on that one. And that kind of leads me into the last point here. And you showed that tweet earlier from the gentleman in North Carolina, whom I will say to folks is a very good person to follow if you're interested in what's going on with the college sports stuff in the state of North Carolina right now. That guy has his finger on the pulse. Yeah, and the folks at those schools talk to him. So I follow him very closely. I put up a post, a quote post about this right here, and we had a really fun conversation. And it kind of was you were involved, and myself, Moen, Big Ten Ted, our web got involved. I highly suggest folks take a look at it. There's a lot of good perspective in it. From me personally, I just like to make sure folks understand when they're having this conversation what pods are and what's possible with them, and that they are subdivisions. I don't know how they got the term pod, but they're subdivisions. So you can't really take someone directly from a pod because the pods have to be merged together to form 2 divisions under current NCAA rules. So, and for us to do some of these conference playoff stuff, we're going to need new rules. We're going to need new rules for divisions, new rules for conference postseason, because conference postseason play is limited right now to just a single conference championship game. That's why they went to the CFP and created that as an LLC, because they actually did that outside of the NCAA, which is kind of hilarious in its own. But yeah, this is, in my opinion, we've talked about this multiple times on the show, and there's just not really been a whole lot of traction for people to grab hold of. But I both think it's just very interesting to see someone else, out in the media world looking at this and saying, look, this is going to be necessary at some point. This isn't just this is a cool idea, let's think about it and talk about it. This is going to be necessary. And that's where I say folks might now be starting to see the big picture, that a lot of this has been put together in steps and stages. And people might think this is crazy talk, but it's really not. And you look at week 0 and week 1, people think that that's not planned for. They can very easily move these conference seasons forward into those weeks. I mean, there's very little usage of them at all right now. So, when you start looking at how the time in late November and December is really clogged, especially with the NFL, they can just move this stuff forward. They really, truly can. And so I would say, watch for the new rules. Watch for this maybe full autonomy. I mean, the risk is that they leave the NCAA to do that, but I don't think anyone's going to let that happen. But I put together a little post there with some numbers. I sent you a DM. I don't know if you see that or not.
Okay.
But it was people seem to think that it's going to add too many games and that it's not possible, that we can't do that. And so I just wanted to show this idea and how many games it would have when you compare it to what 24 and 25 are going to be. It is damn near identical. As you can see here, yeah, this is based upon something our web came together, and he has this, the 3 non-conference, the 9 conference, 1 conference championship game, and then, in the CFP with the buys, you might only play 3 games. So, you're looking at 16 to 17 games. This is not something that needs to get passed. This is passed. This is approved. No one's stepping up to say this is too many games for players. There's no argument. There's no, debate on that. The situation that everyone's now talking about for these conference playoffs it's the same. It's, you're probably moving down to 2 non-conference games, 10 conference games, because your cupcake games in this type of situation, they don't matter. In a subjective rankings-based system where, the difference between 11-1 and 10-2 might be whether or not you're getting involved or not. Cupcake games matter for that because they help improve your odds to get that record that you need. But in a system where you're going through a conference playoff and then into maybe a national playoff, that's about winning, baby. Like, you got to win your division, then you got to win through your conference playoff, and then you go on to the national championship. That is really very little to do with ranking at all. So those cupcake games and having to pay millions of dollars to get someone to come play you, and that, and then you have less people in the stands, and it's really not much of a moneymaker, but it's just to pad your record. Those can be done away with. And, in Iowa, we have to play Iowa State, and we also have a statute that one of us has to play Northern Iowa. I think Nebraska or Illinois helped us out with it, whatever, to play them this year. But Northern Iowa has to play one of us or another one. So there's situations like that around the country. I think the same here in Arizona, where one of them has to play Northern Arizona. So you probably need 2 non-conference games. But after that, you can see most schools that are going to win through, they're probably going to be using the bye system. Because if you have like a 6-team conference playoff, 2 of those teams are getting byes, and you're going to be your best 2 teams. And as we see right now, they're already testing the bye system with the CFP 24 and 25. So the teams that win out of that are likely getting a bye. So they're actually cutting down their play per game. So while someone else could possibly have to play the full amount, they're probably not. And so you're looking at 16-17 versus 16-18. There's no difference here at all. So they're step by step getting us to this position. And some of these pieces for this have been in place for a while. Like, when did we first get week 0? When did we first get week 1? To where, these things that are going to be part of this, major parts of this, have been in place. The fact that, the autonomous conferences and the CFP both started in 2014. So this isn't new. This conference playoff idea is definitely not new. They just haven't been able to get the rules for it. The moment they can get new division rules and new conference postseason rules, we're in this. Wouldn't you think? I mean, once you guys are now starting to look at this seriously, I don't see why there isn't any reason to love this. I mean, the number of games for everyone is going to be like doubled. So there's a lot more money. The big conferences will know exactly how many teams are going to be involved, so they're not like, oh, we're going to get 2 teams in this year, or 3 or 4. They have to adjust their the budget accordingly. It's just in your conference. Your conference isn't going to pay schools to take part in that more. At least the Big Ten wouldn't. They'd just pay everyone equally. Whereas now, schools that take part in the CFP, and probably to some degree in that one as well, will get paid extra. But this is much better for the conference as a whole, and everyone has an equal vote. So I think this is just a matter of time, and I'm really happy that people are starting to talk about this now.
Yeah,
because I think that's the future, like 2026 and beyond.
Yeah, I do as well, and I think if like starting next year, if we get a finish in a like in the SEC where there's 3 teams with 1 loss and none of them played each other, that's going to start pushing this even more. So,
yeah.
But yeah.
That's why I say House versus NCAA is like the price tag for getting this. I mean, there's going to be a lot of schools that are not going to be able to afford that settlement amount. Yeah. And they're going to need some angel investor to come in and help them out with it. And, who better than the autonomous conferences and their benefactors to come in and pay for it and say, we will help you out of this in return for your votes.
Yeah. All righty, man. Thanks, Immaculate.
Right.
You guys having a show tonight?
Nah, we don't do Mondays.
Got
It's
it.
not during the season, but we'll be around tomorrow. We'll see. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of new news by then.
Got it. All right. Appreciate it, sir. Great call, Mr. Hawkeye. one of the, as Ryan Brooks made a mention here, could they drop a non-conference game for a semifinal weekend? One of the issues of a 10 conference game schedule and 2 non-conference game schedule is there are going to be years that you're going to have 6 home games instead of 7. When you have 9 conference games and 3 non-conference games, you can go 4-5, 5-4. You rotate it every other year for your conference home and away games. And then, so for example, in the Big Ten, if you play 4 home conference games and 5 away conference games, then your non-conference slate is 3 home games. So you go 7-5, 7 at home, 5 in a row. If you go 5 home games and 4 road games in your conference slate, then you go 2-1 in your non-conference, 2 at home, 1 away. So you're always being able to make sure you have 7 home games and 5 road games. With 10-2, you're going 5-5, right? 5-5, and then 2 non-conference. You're not going to be able to play all your non-conference games at home. I mean, Iowa State, Iowa's not going to get to have all those games at home. So now there are going to be times where you go down to 6 home games, and nobody wants to do that. So I don't know. We've been down deep weeds on this, and I appreciate the comments. One comment here in regards to now I can't find it. Stephen Vitt, Minnesota, 5-7. Minnesota shouldn't get into a bowl over even at 11-1. James Madison. James Madison is bowl eligible, I believe, if there's not enough 6-6 teams to fill up the slots. So I believe Brett McMurphy's analyzing of it is James Madison gets a bowl spot. Those are one. That's why there's only, because they're not even, I think there's like 6-7 teams short of filling up the 6-6 teams. So maybe not that many short, but I think James Madison gets in ahead of Minnesota, even under their situation, even without getting the waiver. James Madison is eligible to go to a bowl game if there's not enough 6-6 teams. They're not eligible to go to their Sun Belt Conference Championship game. At least that's what I've been reading for the last few weeks. They're not eligible to get to a New Year's Bowl game. They're not eligible to get to the Conference Championship game. But I believe they're eligible if there's not enough 6-6 teams. You know what? I'm going to post that again just to make sure. I believe that's what Brett McMurphy and others have been saying. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got it all wrong. Let me just quickly. Yeah, it's exactly. So if you go to the, there are 67 bowl eligible teams to fill 82 spots, with another 24 teams still alive to fight for bowl eligibility. Of those 24 teams, 12 are underdogs in the finales. So if there are no upsets in college football, there would be 79 bowl eligible teams with 3 openings. 2 of those spots would be filled by James Madison and Jacksonville State, because they both have 6+ wins and are eligible in their second year, reclassifying. This is today, November 20th. So yeah, James Madison, all likely, is going to a bowl game. So is Jacksonville State. And then after those 2 teams, and then you get to the 5-7s, then you talk about Wake Forest, Minnesota, Rice. If none of those teams get to 6 wins, all those teams have a chance to get to 6 wins. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, let me get back here. Got it. Yeah, James Madison gets over 5 and 7 teams. It's confusing. It's confusing. These teams that are on waivers, Jacksonville State cannot play in the Conference USA Championship game. James Madison cannot play in the Sun Belt Conference Championship game. Sam Houston, if they were in position, which they're not, they wouldn't be able to go to the Conference USA Championship game. A lot of movements. No need, Swaim show. No need for conference championships anymore. But you got to have a conference champion. So how would you decide who the conference champions are? Would you just declare someone a champion? Plus all that money that those conferences get for the conference championship game, the sponsorship money, the media money. I don't believe the conference championships are going anywhere. Remember, the top rated, the 5, it's going to be 5. The top 5 rated conference champions are going to get an automatic berth in the expanded playoffs. The top 4 rated teams are going to get a bye in the first round. So you have to have a declared conference champion. I don't know how you can declare one if you don't have a conference championship game. I would say I believe there's way more of a chance. The odds favor that we go to a semifinal weekend versus going to no conference championship games at all. That's my belief. I don't think conferences have any interest. They're not interested in getting rid of their basketball tournament at the end of the year to get a conference champion. They're not interested in getting rid of their softball tournaments, their volleyball conference. All these conferences for all these sports have conference championships. I don't think they're going to get rid of it in football. One seed is a champion, but okay, but what if you have 2 teams that are undefeated? I just don't think it's going to happen, but I appreciate the comment. Or if both teams have 1 loss, they didn't play each other. I mean, there's a whole lot of money that's getting paid out for these conference championship games, and the conference keeps it, and they distribute it per the bylaws of the conference. I think the value of the conference championship games are only going to go up because of how they've got the expanded playoff format set up. And that's not by accident. The presidents, the athletic directors want their conference championship games to become even more valuable. And now you have reached G5 conferences where their conference championship game is now even more valuable because of the tie-in where the 5 top conference champions get automatic berth and the top 4 get a first round bye. So I think it's going the other way. I don't think conference championship games are going anywhere. I think they're becoming even more valuable. Okay, I'm just going to check out one message here. Before I do, again, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Make sure you get universally notified when we come on live with a live show, with an episode. And again, we have introduced Saturday, we have introduced our extra college football's early peak episode. The first one dropped this morning for early peak membership. It gives you an early peek on the nuggets of information that we are providing. Plus, we're going to be talking about recruiting. We're going to be talking about stadium renovations. We're going to open up the lens. We're going to be talking about more things than we've ever talked about before in the college football landscape. This is college football's early peak with an early peak membership. The first one dropped this morning. You just got to hit the join button and get yourself a membership. Thank you so very much. We've already had a whole bunch of membership already bought, way beyond our projections. We just started this Saturday. It's only Monday, and we appreciate. A lot of people loved it. We gave an early peek to a couple stories that we talked about today in our live show. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to cover topics that we don't normally cover on our live shows and our other episodes. We're not taking anything away. We're not taking away any content at all. So the people who don't want to become members, early peak members, we're not taking away anything. No live. All the live shows the same. Watch party the same. The episodes, we dropped episode 332 today on Jamie Chadwell. Still the number one on the Mississippi State Bulldogs hot board list. We're not taking anything away. We're adding content. Remember, college football, peek around the corner. We try to give you that little bit of extra college football content to get you through the days, to get you through the nights. Well, this is a little bit extra content, even a little bit more. So early peak membership, hit that join button if you're interested. We dropped the first episode this morning. So give it a look. Thank you so much. Mr. Jim Bagley, for becoming an early peak member. Thank you for your generosity. As always, Mr. Bagley, I appreciate it. It's going very well. People really appreciated that episode this morning. It got you all ready for the live show later today. It gave you just a little bit of information. We did more of a deep dive of the FCS playoffs, the seedings. What does it mean? Furman is number 2 in the country. Number 2, North Dakota State, number 9. They didn't even get a first round bye. We do a deeper dive. We do a lot of different things at early peak episodes. So give it a watch with the membership, $5.99 a month. Thank you once again, Mr. Jim Bagley. And a plus, of course, you know how it works. We get to your super chat comments. We get to them right away. Membership comments in the chat, we try to get to them sooner rather than later. So, again, thank you so very much. Great response so far for our early peak membership. Made the right choice and subscribed to Greg. Thank you, Go Black. Appreciate it. Now, this is different than a subscription. I appreciate everybody subscribing. I appreciate it so very much. This is the membership. Early peak membership. There's going to be early peak episodes for members. So think about if you want to join, hit the join button. There's only one level, $5.99 a month. And hopefully we'll figure out the old people buying memberships for other people in the chat. I think that's going to happen here soon. But appreciate it. Appreciate the great response. Let's get back to the chat room. Phone lines are open, 763-260-1333, 763-260-1333. Hear me out. Conference bowl games the weekend of conference semifinals. Teams from conference can schedule a bowl with another team in the conference they haven't played yet that year. Okay? Alrighty. there is an NCAA rule that limits the conference postseason to one game currently. Yes, there's a lot of limitations right now. There used to be more limitations. Now they've, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I can't think of it. Yeah, there are limitations. No question about it. For now. Now let me just check out something here. Someone gave me some information. I want to make sure. We had some breaking news during the live show. Big Ten has a partnership with Greenfly. It's going to give the ability for student athletes to get to use the tool of Greenfly for their Big Ten network videos, photos and videos, high-tech videos, and use them in their NIL, to use them to increase their brand value, so they can use it on their digital platforms that these student athletes use. They can grab it. And that's what it sounds like to me. Breaking news this afternoon. Haven't quite figured it all out yet. Again, these conferences are going to get more and more involved in NIL deals. Student athletes across, not just the football players, not just the basketball players, all the student athletes across all their sports sponsored teams across the conference. These conferences are going to become more and more powerful. Okay, I think I can't really go with that information that I just received. I'm going to have to do some deep diving on that. Tough Tony, thank you for the super chat. Thank you so much for your continued generosity. If Michigan beats Ohio State, is there any chance they will be... No, I don't think so. I don't think so. But you know what? I'm going to put up a poll question. Is Ohio State... I'm sorry. I'm going to put that differently. Will Ohio State Buckeyes defeat the Michigan Wolverines in Ann Arbor this weekend? The poll, the voting starts now. Will Ohio State Buckeyes defeat the Michigan Wolverines in Ann Arbor this weekend? Thank you so much for the super chat, Tony. I just don't believe Ryan Day is going to be fired. Even if they lose 3 in a row to the Michigan Wolverines. But I tell you, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on Ryan Day. And I agree with Immaculate. J.J. McCarthy is not looking good now. So, I don't know. I'm afraid to say anything. I'm afraid to say anything because whatever team I pick, I'm going to ice them out. They're not going to have any chance of winning. Greg the Cooler is going to just crush them. Okay, I'm going to give you 10 more seconds to vote. We got a close vote. It's 50-50. 50-50. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 52% of the vote says yes. The Ohio State Buckeyes will defeat the Michigan Wolverines. The peek around the corner community has spoken. 52-48. It was close. It was a close vote. The Moen Show. Greg, you better pick Michigan. Greg the Cooler needs to pick Michigan. I'm afraid. I am so afraid. I think I'll probably make a decision Friday. But I know whoever I pick, that fan base is going to be so mad at me. So mad at me. So I got to be careful. I got to figure out what I'm going to do. Oh, boy. Okay, we're going to lock it up for the live show today. Thank you for all joining us this Monday afternoon. Jim Phillips. It's not what he's saying, it's what he's not saying. If you missed it, go back to the start of the show, live show. Jim Phillips, Charlotte, North Carolina, Charlotte Business Journal. We'll just put it up on the screen real quick. It fortifies the fortress. Talking about the latest expansion moves from the ACC, California, Stanford, SMU. If a couple want to go, if a couple schools want to go, they can go, and it won't take down the conference like we saw on the West Coast. That's not going to happen. Again, we don't believe he's saying, oh yeah, if a couple schools want to leave the ACC, they can easily leave. It's not what he's saying. It's what he's not saying. Jim Phillips continues not to say the following. No schools are leaving the ACC. It's going to be mighty difficult for ACC schools going to leave. How are they going to break the grant of rights? They're going to have to go to the courts. We're all united. He's not saying any of those typical traditional commissioner phrases to keep the conference united. Because I believe he knows how active, he's got to know how active Florida State and Clemson has been behind the curtain. He does not want to lose credibility within his own conference. George Kliavkoff lost all credibility when he said foolish statements like UCLA is going to make more money if he stays in the Pac-12 than go to the Big Ten because of the Big Ten traveling costs. Kliavkoff said statement after statement after statement that did not ring true. I believe Jim Phillips is making sure he does not make statements that don't ring true. To all the schools in the ACC, they made a proactive move. They backfilled before they really needed it to get California, Stanford, and SMU into the ACC because I think he knows things are a-popping. So that's what we brought to you in our early peak video early this morning with an early peak membership for memberships only. And that's what we brought to you in the live show today, this afternoon. Please stay with us here at Peek Around the Corner as we cover all the stories in college football. If you haven't done so, please subscribe. Make sure you're notified of the next time we come up live. We have live shows popping up anytime, episodes popping up anytime. And if you're interested in the early peak membership, episodes for membership only, giving you the early peek on nuggets of information, hit that join button and join us at early peak. Until next time. From all of us at PATC to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.